Chris, that sounded like a very, very bad die roll.
Okay. All right. 2.
All right, Chris, the topic we will be discussing today is, what do you do when you don't like the tone at the game table?
Ooh. Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
Andy, and I didn't tell you this before we hit record, but I'm going to call out this is the second take of this episode.
Yes. There is, I think this would be the third time in the history of this podcast we recorded something, and in retrospect, we're like, nope.
Yep. Yeah, and this one I'm going to chalk up to technical difficulties more than anything.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So we'll just be reading the script, which is kind of weird that we had this, this part of it written in the script the first time through too, but that's just how it goes when you're professionals.
Right.
Yeah.
So Chris, do you want to, why don't you share, so you've had an exciting week or so. Why did we have technical difficulties? I'm teeing you up.
Yeah, that's a good segue.
What's the sports term? If I'm like putting you in a good position to hit the ball, what am I doing?
I mean, teeing up sounded pretty good. There's probably like a handful of them for every sport out there. Let's see there's alley-oops in basketball.
Okay.
We got to get at least one of them like really wrong though. So John Corey.
What's the volleyball? What's the volleyball one where you?
Oh, when you set? Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
That's what I have in my mind. That's what I was doing for you. So
yeah. Okay.
All right. Carry on.
Anyway, so we had if you are in southeastern Michigan, or I guess in the Midwest, you're probably extremely aware of this, but there was a pretty bad ice storm that ripped through. So we were without power at my house for a handful of days. Which meant that, everything just sort of got thrown into absolute chaos, especially with 2 kids at home as well. So we ended up at a hotel for a few days. Yeah. And just trying to check in on the house, making sure it was still standing here and there. But yes, so all is better. All is right with the world. I have been promised by our electric company that this will never happen again.
Of course. Yeah.
I have no reason to distrust them, right? Because they let it happen the first time. So.
I have to share I have a sister who lives in very rural Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister has a convoluted little armada of Raspberry Pis set up monitoring temperature around the house that send panicky emails if power goes out or something like that, because I think you have 7 minutes to avoid your pipes freezing and breaking where she lives. So.
It's similar to if the sun goes out, you have 10 minutes left before all the heat and light.
Exactly.
That's pretty smart. I mean, it did. So, I mean, right. Again, because we all have GM brain, thinking about the power outage really just makes you aware of all the little conveniences in your life that really matter, really matter to you.
Yeah.
And just how useless you would be on an actual adventure, right? I mean, if I don't have my, my special pillow and my CPAP machine, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it a week in the wild.
So thinking of that, so obviously post-apocalyptic type of stuff is very popular these days.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of good post-apocalypse RPGs out there. How long do you think it takes before, imagine this is like a game scenario, how long before you decide this may not ever end and I need to switch into survival mode?
Oh, that's a really good question. Right. So we're watching The Last of Us right now, and there's definitely some characters in that show that it was 20 minutes into the into the zombie outbreak, finally my time to shine.
Right.
I am probably I'm not going to last at all in the post-apocalypse. So probably it would take me a year before I would be maybe we're not going back to normal on this one. Yeah.
Month 10, Chris is just, the government will roll into town any day now and fix this.
Yeah, as we've learned from every possible retelling of the post-apocalypse, the government's going to be the one that'll save us.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, we're obviously all glad to have you back and back in your home where there's electricity and power and all the other things that we need to live and that we need in order to run good role-playing games.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I did suggest to you at the time,
Mm-hmm.
And I am profoundly disappointed in you that you did not do that candlelight RPG session.
Yes, yeah, that is true. It would have been a perfect time to play 10 candles
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
inside the chilly, increasingly cold and colder living room.
So, in between power failures and infrastructure collapses, have you been watching or reading anything with a gamey connection?
Yeah, we have been watching Poker Face, which I think you've been watching as well.
I have, yes. On your recommendation, I think. Or maybe it was the other way around.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. So this is it Ryan Johnson? Is that how you say his name? Yeah,
I
Ryan.
never know how to say his name, so let's just say Ryan.
I think it's that, right? So he has done the like Knives Out movies. He did one of the Star Wars movies, which I thought was fine, but I'm not a real fan, so whatever. To keep your opinions to yourself.
Yeah,
But
I just, listeners, I'm having a little hard time breathing. It'll
yeah,
be okay.
yeah,
I'll deal with Chris after the recording. Don't worry.
yes. He also did a movie called, I think it might have been his first feature film, called Brick, which was also sort of a mystery
Oh, yeah.
movie that was kind of an indie darling way back when. Anyway, so this is a guy who sort of like knows how to do a mystery on like in a visual medium. Yeah, so Poker Face is like sort of his crack at Columbo, I guess you could kind of say.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it stars Natasha Lyonne is like the main character, but it's super good. I really like it. I am also just like such a sucker for those types of shows. And I think it's like you and I have talked, like neither of us are the sorts of people who are like, oh, that's the twist. Like we
Right.
know what the
Yeah.
twist is. Yeah, it's just like it surprises me every time how she
Oh
solves
yeah,
them.
I'm surprised by twists in like Transformers movies.
Yeah,
That's how big of a sucker I am, and
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. It's great. It's a really fun way to live. Yeah. So I mean, like the mysteries are not or the like the murders are not complex. I would say in Poker Face, like it usually sort of hinges on one or two details. That she picks up on, a couple minutes before that you pick up on them. But yeah, it's really good. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I think we're like three or so episodes in. It does have me thinking about Brindlewood Bay, right? Because
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
like, yeah, it's a pretty easy hop, skip, and a jump over to Brindlewood Bay.
I feel
Yeah.
like mysteries are enjoying a bit of a renaissance in the RPG world right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of smaller scale projects, RPG projects over the last 5 years have circled around the mystery ish genre.
Hmm.
So I don't know. That's just a hunch I have, but it feels like it's almost everyone loves a good mystery, right? In
Hmm.
some, I mean, there's different variants on mystery and what that could look like, but we all love a good mystery story. But I don't think it's too controversial to say it's a really underserved genre in the RPG world.
Hmm.
And I've seen countless discussions of like, how do I do a mystery in such and such a system, or how do I do a murder mystery in D&D and things like that. And I don't know.
Hmm.
I think it's kind of delightful to see stuff like Brindlewood Bay. Like there's some older stuff. Like I just picked up Monster of the Week
Hmm.
recently, which, while not a murder mystery exactly, I think is born out of that same interest in that sort of serial serial mystery genre.
Yeah.
And I've got, like, on my shelf, I've got like Bubblegum Shoe and some other
Hmm.
games. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone solved how to do mysteries in RPGs. I think Brindlewood Bay would get my vote for coming the closest to nailing it. But yeah,
Yeah. It gets the closest to nailing the feeling. And I think like we've talked about in the past about how a lot of role playing is wanting to emulate genre, right? Like that's sort of what you're after.
yeah,
And I think like that satisfaction of solving the case is just like such a high that everybody is chasing. And Brindlewood Bay just gets that exactly right.
yeah,
Right. Like, yeah, you get a bunch of clues, you piece them together, and you can make a die roll and sort of see if you're, you're successful or not.
yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with my wife about this a little bit too. Like, I was trying to we're thinking about we were talking about like true crime podcasts. Like, this is
Hmm,
not a genre that I enjoy at all. So,
yeah.
despite enjoying murder mysteries, like the idea of a true crime podcast is just like, why would you ever subject yourself to that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to ask you: is that a genre that you enjoy?
Well, first of all, I have to say, isn't it so weird that one of the coziest genres around is the murder mystery
Yeah,
genre, and
it's
it's like
terrible.
a
Yeah.
close cousin to the grimmest, most bleak genre possible, which is like, true crime.
Yeah.
uh, so I've enjoyed a handful. I've like listened to one or two seasons of like Serial.
Hmm.
I guess I enjoy interesting real life cases. I don't enjoy what I would consider the more kind of lurid, like let's see what Marilyn, or let's see what Manson, how he
Hmm.
killed all his victims, like that sort of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, there is that. Like, I tried to watch Dexter a little bit, and it was just like
yeah,
it sort of like reveled in the like how he did it
yeah,
a little bit
serial
too much.
killers. I have no interest in slash. I'm somewhat repulsed by in general the serial killer genre, although
Hmm.
I realize that's, if I mean, no offense if you're into that sort of thing. It's just not
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, it does. Like I was just thinking about the I Am Legend. Did you see that movie, or I guess read the to see the
Yeah,
movie?
I was
Did
gonna
you?
say
You've read the book,
that
right?
is a flaming hot take right there.
Yeah.
I've read the book and I've
Yes.
seen the abomination that is the
Yes.
movie. But yes,
Anyway, I was thinking about that, and I mean it's a fantastic short story, but like it really kind of it talks about like it's almost told from the perspective, I would say, of a serial killer, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, it does sort of make me wonder about like you have these tabletop games, so it's like this the murder hobos designation gets kind of thrown around a lot
yeah,
about various parties and stuff, but like I mean, yeah, you think about it, like the trail of destruction that a typical adventuring party leaves would be the sort of thing that a detective could spend their entire career trying to try to track
yeah.
down and bring these people to justice. Yeah, so I don't know about if there's any RPGs that really kind of like play into that part of the experience, but I think it'd be kind of a fun thing to explore if there's a a way to be like, yeah, the person who has to go and clean up after the heroes.
For sure.
Yeah.
The a couple quick comments. Yeah, I recently actually read. I read that book with my teenager,
Mhm.
and they picked up much quicker than I read it when I was young as well for the first time, so I was wanted them to read it while they were at a good age for it. They picked up much faster than me that he's just the main character is just basically a serial
Yeah.
killer.
Mhm.
I was again harking back to that.
Yes.
I'm a sucker for all kinds of twists. I just take at face value whatever a film or book is telling me, and then I'm blown away when the twist arrives. But
Yeah.
it took me a lot longer to realize, oh, if you look at this from a slightly different angle, this guy is a psychopathic killer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so can you rephrase your question for
Oh
me?
yeah, yeah. So I was asking, yeah. So I did sort of talk a lot right there. I was wondering if there are any games out there that you've experienced or seen that sort of deal with that. Like, how would you play a game where you're sort of like dealing with the aftermath of what the heroes have done?
That's a great question. I feel like most games in storytelling in general, the story we want to see is that justice is done and the problem is solved.
Hmm.
And I feel like we're just hardwired to think that the protagonist should be the one who's doing the solving or the bringing to justice. You and I have chatted a little bit about like occasionally in shows like Glass Onion did this. You'll get like a mystery where you can solve, or actually Poker Face does this a little bit too. You can solve the mystery but not resolve it, and
Hmm.
I think that's a really unsatisfying space to live in
Hmm.
unless you're a really good storyteller. And so I feel like an RPG that posited that. So first of all, I mean, it would work as a fantastic. I think anyone would get into it as like a one shot. You're the
Hmm.
cleanup crew after John Wick has like plowed through the scene or something like
Yeah.
that.
Jeez. Yeah.
Uh, but I think long term, most of us would shift to want to be whoever had been this. We would feel like we were not the star of the story, and I think that
Hmm.
would be a little uncomfortable unless you had great player buy-in, which maybe you do.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, yeah, player buy-in is sort of everything. But I think you're right, and once you hit the point where it was like you had cleaned up whatever had happened, or you had brought the the so-called heroes to justice or whatever, I think there wouldn't be a lot of impetus to sort of like go on to the next one, right? It would be this thing that, yeah, like you've completed the mission, right? Like there isn't a second step there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but as a
And
one shot, it could be super fun. Yeah.
I guess incredibly well, mild spoilers for Glass Onion, so skip ahead 30 seconds. You know, as you and I have discussed with Glass Onion, there's a point at the end where in real life you would stop and call the cops and step
Hmm.
back. But in the world of the movie, that would be unsatisfying. So the movie acknowledges, okay, this is the point where normally the cops would be called, but we're going to move ahead anyway and bring justice here
Yeah.
because that stopping and calling the authorities wouldn't bring a satisfying justice conclusion, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to state it. Yeah, go watch Glass Onion if you
Uh,
haven't, but it's, yeah, it's pretty good.
so, Chris, I have one more question
Oh
related to
yeah.
this before we jump into our tone
Mhm.
topic of tone. And I'm wondering because Poker Face, like many other um, stories that we watch, it has it uses the device of showing you what happened, so you watch the murder take place and you know who did it and everything like that, and then
Mhm.
it basically pulls the 24 hours earlier
Yeah.
uh trick, and you see that in lots of different shows. Have you ever done or have you ever thought of an RPG session that started with that kind of climactic scene and then was
Mm,
like, we're going to rewind 2 days before and
yeah.
yeah, what, have you ever tried that or thought about it?
Yeah, so my GM Matt, we did I think it was in the Planescape universe. He actually did that. He started us off with like a here's the scene that you're sort of shooting for, and then let's go
Hmm.
back 3 days
Yep.
and try to get there. Which was a gutsy move on his part. We got there, we got there, and it was very very fun to see that pulled off. I think like to me this sort of comes down to the question of like how do you think about how the story is being told at your table? So I know a lot of people will use the language of cinematography when they're describing scenes. So they might even talk about like the camera itself sort of moving around the scene. That's not necessarily how I like to describe stuff. So I think it'd be hard for me to be like, here's this other thing that you sort of need to know about, but like you're not there necessarily, right? Like, yeah, so giving them that whole scene in a way that isn't like, maybe, I don't know, like a write-up from a newspaper or something like that
Hmm.
afterwards, like I think that sort of break it a little bit for me. Yeah, because then otherwise, like then you're getting to this point where it's like, well, how do I make sure that whatever the players did in this scene that I told that's in the future, like how do I make sure that we sort of get there together to where they
Yeah.
would still do that in the same way? Yeah. So then,
When
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, as a player, I didn't mean to cut you off. As a player, did you find yourself consciously working towards that scene?
Yes, yeah, and we could like as soon as we started seeing it sort of coming, it was like, oh great, like we've sort of hit the checkpoint, hit
Hmm.
the checkpoint there. That group I think really liked that sort of setup. I could see some people like being like, well, we're just on, it's a railroad situation, right? Like there's no way for us to change the outcome of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which sort of like whatever. I'm listen to this podcast. I'm not against that style of storytelling. The one game that I think does this super well is 10 Candles actually does have you record a message um, to be played at the end of the game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you record a message in character on like a phone or tape recorder or something like that, and then at the end of it, you play all those messages. At the table, it's super fun. It's very bleak, right? Because like the whole the whole game is like there is going to be a total party kill. Like it's just sort of a matter of what ends up happening.
Yeah.
So you have sort of your last words put down in a recording
Yeah.
beforehand. Yeah, and that's like it's super good. And I mean, I think if you have the right players, everybody's sort of working towards making that true as
Yeah.
part of the game.
In at least one of the Alien games I ran, I had a player at the end of the game read kind of a Ripley style closing monologue. This
Hmm.
is the last survivor of the
Yeah.
Nostromo signing off. What if next time I do Alien, I'm going to think about having that be opening with that. but leaving it vague, like who the only survivor is, but
Yes.
communicating clearly that only one person will be alive at the end of this.
Oh, that is
Uh,
really good. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Um,
hey, let's jump into our topic here.
yeah.
So this is a topic we have. I don't think we have actually discussed this as an official topic, at least
Hmm.
not in this form. But you and I have certainly spent a lot of time over the years and episodes talking about this question of hitting the right tone at the game table. And I guess
Hmm.
this question is specifically about what do you do when the tone is off.
Yeah.
But do you have any opening thoughts on this or quick gut reactions?
Yeah, yeah. I think when we've talked about this in the past, sort of the phrasing we've used is like adventure slapstick is sort of the that ends
Yeah.
up being somewhat the default tone of most gaming tables that we've been at. Yeah, where like you, unless you're being really careful, you trend towards sort of, yeah, like jokey violence, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
in the
yeah.
absence of a different tone, it
Hmm.
seems to gravitate towards that kind of Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy style like jokiness.
Hmm. Yeah. Which, like, again, like, I mean, I don't necessarily see that as like a totally negative thing, but sometimes you don't want that, right? Like, sometimes you don't want that tone, either as part of the session or for the entire session,
Yeah.
and there's good and valid reasons why you might want to do that. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, you are running a Call of Cthulhu game right now, right? Which in theory should have some horror horror
Yep.
elements to it. I guess, how are you navigating that? Because, like, again, Call of Cthulhu has plenty of opportunities to go adventure slapstick if you let it, but if you want to lean into that horror, yeah, how do you make that happen?
Yeah, good question. So I have I before I address that Call of Cthulhu question, I want to say I have wondered sometimes if actually D&D. I don't think it's a surprise. I don't think it's too revelatory to say that this sort of Joss Whedon, unfortunately, just this
Mm,
Whedon-esque style of banter and dialogue has sort of taken over an awful lot of
mm,
our at least cinematic, and frankly, I've read a lot of books that have a sort of Whedon-ish vibe to them, published in the last 15 or so years.
yeah.
I sometimes wonder if D&D has was one of the places that we got this from. Simply
Oh.
because, as long as I can remember, going back for me, this is going back to the early 80s, that jokey, taking it seriously but not too seriously style has been like intrinsic to almost every D&D game I've played. And I just wonder if like the resurgence of this is due, I mean, obviously a lot of it's due to kind of comic book storytelling, but I just personally wonder if there's a lot of people out there in creative industries that grew up playing D&D and absorbed this as sort of a default way to be participants in an adventure story.
Huh. That's a fascinating point. I guess I want to flip that around to you just real quick. So I have not watched The Expanse before, but does The Expanse also sort of fit into that? Because I know that's a show that is very much driven by sort of a tabletop mentality.
It is. It's short. It does not. It's not Guardians of the Galaxy level. Like we're not taking this seriously at all.
Hmm.
But the characters talk like they talk like kind of Joss Whedon protagonists, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. It's a. I've mostly read the books and only I've seen some of the show, but
Hmm.
it's more serious than like your Marvel style. But the banter between characters is very much of the you know ironic detachment
Yeah.
variety. So
The Battlestar Galactica came up at work recently. Someone hadn't seen it, and so everybody jumped on a thread and was like, you gotta watch it, right? It's super
yeah.
great." I'm trying to imagine Battlestar Galactica with like quips like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, imagine if Admiral Adama, like, every once in a while, just like, so say we all, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, he sort of like
Right.
jokingly said that. It'd be like, it would undercut everything about so many of those
Oh,
characters.
you're so
Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
actually have been so in the last like month I've rewatched the first season of
Mm,
that Battlestar show, and you're right. It's like it is deadly serious. And
yes.
that's part of it. that's part of why it works, because you never doubt for a second that these people are in mortal danger and they know it. It
Hmm.
is also a reason that I feel like by the time you, after like 3 seasons, you're like, think I'm done with this show.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's not a lot of need for like stand-up comedians in that feature.
Right.
Yeah.
But hey,
Uh,
I wanted to circle. I don't want to
yeah,
lose track of
yeah.
that Cthulhu question you asked. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so I'm running a Cthulhu game for family members of varying ages. So I want to. So my teenager is one of the players in the game, and really the main audience for this game, if
Hmm.
I'm to be totally honest. And one of my goals with this, well, my main goal was just to have family time doing something we all enjoy, which is role playing. But one of my goals was, since my teenager is already in a D&D game that meets weekly and that is very much, totally standard D&D, slapstick, jokey, awesome, fun, that sort of thing. I wanted Call of Cthulhu to feel different for them, because I'd like them to know that you can tell different kinds of stories in role playing games.
Hmm.
So I do not, especially, I don't want to rub their face in the nihilistic horror that is the, Lovecraftian worldview, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's part of, but that is part of the different experience that I want them to get at least a glimpse of. So the
Hmm.
way I've handled it, and as I describe this, I don't want to make it sound too intentional. It kind of happened this way, but we've basically had two extended adventures, each of which took about 4 game nights to resolve. And the first of them was grim and gross and disgusting and had body horror,
Hmm.
and the monster was really, repulsive, and a lot of kind of alien style, like awfulness. The second adventure, I wish I had planned it. It just worked out this way. The second adventure was like on the other end of the spectrum of horror. If like one end of the horror is, whatever, David Cronenberg
Hmm.
body horror, and the flip side of that is Scooby Doo. Like, uh, the second adventure we ran was more Scooby Doo ish,
Yeah.
in that the twist of it was there wasn't anything supernatural going on. It was a guy in a monster costume, like literally,
Yeah.
and I didn't play it I didn't play it completely for laughs,
Yeah.
but I realized as I was running that the kind of silliness of this is actually a way of reinforcing the horror, when of making the horror hit a little harder when
Hmm.
we inevitably return to it, which we are, and into the next session is going to be another grim murders and
Yeah.
awfulness. So
Huh.
that happened without a lot of planning, but it made me realize this is going to be a good way to do this tone thing. For the most part, I play it pretty serious. The NPCs they interact with are taking the world seriously. They're reacting to the horrors around them in a realistic way, not a jokey or ironic way.
Hmm.
But I do also believe you can't maintain that over the long term without occasionally giving vent to our need to kind of have a laugh at how silly all of this is.
Yeah.
So my plan is to, like, mostly run grim, nihilistic cosmic horror, but I'm going to be intentionally interspersing interludes where we can kind of laugh at what we're doing. So that's a
Yeah.
very long-winded answer to your question. Any reactions?
Yeah, I think my first reaction is like that is pretty smart, right? To sort of like do that pendulum swing of like, yeah, here's the super serious and here's the not. Although there is a certain amount of terror if you really think about Scooby Doo, about like these people spending so much time creating this persona that they can use to like terrorize small children. It's like,
Yes.
what is wrong with you? Like, I'd
Yes.
rather take like the ghost or the like the wolf man, because I can understand that, but like this, yeah, okay. Anyway, but um yeah, I mean, it's like there is that, I think there is that need of like, yeah, kind of like tension and release and stuff, and
Yeah.
a lot of things. I mean, even conversations, right? Like yeah, I think it's like sort of like where do you draw that line? And that's almost, I think it might be that's on a group by group basis of like, what does the group need? Some groups might need that tension release every 5 minutes or so for
Yep.
various reasons. Like, well, like what if they're, yeah, everybody's having like a really hard time at work and they don't want to like, yeah,
Yeah.
do your diplomatic sit down dinner where everything's very intense and talking. It's like, I just did that at work. Can we please go like, yeah, pull the mask off some silly guy, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's that. I mean, and the other thing that I'm wondering too is right, like so, like Cthulhu, right, like has all that stuff sort of built in, even like mechanically and stuff. And then going back to your point about D&D, I think like there's mechanics in D&D also sort of support that slapstick,
they do. Yes.
yeah, like slapstick adventure as well. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just thinking about like, and I think, even like 10 Candles, right? Like we're just like talking about like how these mechanics can sort of drive the tone as well. And I wonder if that's sort of like the key there, right? So you have some storytelling hooks that you can push on, but there's also some like mechanical hooks that you can push on for the
Yeah.
tone as well. So like I'm guessing, maybe I'm wrong, like when you were doing the more Scooby-Doo style adventure, people were probably not rolling their Cthulhu mythos abilities as much,
Right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, right. Like, and I think that like that's the sort of thing, like mechanically, when you're making that roll, like a sanity roll or something like that feels like it has mechanical and like long-term implications in a way that, I don't know, swinging your attack, your sword for the second time doesn't.
Yeah. D&D has a lot of stuff in the mechanics that I feel produce comedy.
Hmm.
Um, a large chunk of the spells, and this gets even more pronounced as you go back in editions. Um, a lot of the spells are, basically wacky, zany things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Your alignment changes, and it seems pretty clear that the slapstick fun of it was part of it, was
Hmm.
part of the, desired experience.
Yeah. Have you
So
ever
if
read have you read the book The Magicians before?
is that
Lev Grossman,
yes,
maybe?
I have. Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've got like mixed opinions on that, but that book, I think its version of magic feels very very like consequence laden, I would
Yep.
say, right? Like, so like every sort of spell like has both a large amount of effort into it, and it feels like it's sort of ripping at what the world what the world
Hmm.
is and what it wants to be.
Yep.
Whereas with D&D, it's like, oh, I use my spell slot to make you laugh really hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah. And so I mean, how could you not find the comedy in that sort of naturally? Like, I challenge anyone to cast like Tasha's hideous laugh on someone and not find it funny, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a very funny spell. Like it's
Right.
very
For
funny.
sure. Yep.
Yeah.
An awful lot of D&D games I've had have wound up with some kind of comic relief character in them.
Hmm.
You like some sort of NPC companion or something like that, who serves a purpose in the story or and in the adventure, but who winds up generating a lot of the like the outright slapstick comedy. So
Hmm.
I wonder if just cutting that character out, cutting that character out, or if you don't want that slapstick tone, and
Hmm.
maybe you do, in which case leave the character there. But
Yeah.
you know, um, and thinking about creatures like kobolds and goblins get kind of routinely played for kind of their jokey,
Hmm.
for somewhat comic relief as bad guys and stuff. I think that it doesn't take very much work to twist those guys a little bit so the comic relief goes down and the unnerving horror goes up, I guess.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean, I think we need to start wrapping our conversation up.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I think eh, the thing that I'm taking away from this a little bit is like, like there are things you can do to influence the tone. Part of it might just be the group that you have, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just they're going to kind of find the tone um, that they want to. And I think like embracing whatever the mechanics of the game give you is going to be is pretty
Hmm.
important too. I
Yep.
think like if you're playing D&D and you're just like sort of always mad that your party is making jokes or making friends with goblins and stuff, it's like, I don't know, like D&D might not be for it might not be for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like because yeah, it's going to take a lot to break out of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'll tell you, I haven't had this problem running like the Alien
mhm.
RPG, which is incredibly explicit about the tone it's trying to create.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get you could play it outside of that tone, but you would be fighting against both the mechanics of the game, which are
Hmm.
designed to create stress and other non-funny problems,
Yeah.
and against the spirit of the source material. which is
Mm-hmm.
reinforced by, you know, by everything, the font in the book, the
Yeah.
style of the map you're using,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I played in the one shot that you ran of that a year or two ago or so, and I remember. I mean, the character that I was playing was like, I mean, was sort of the comic relief, but he was like mean too, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah, there's just like this element of like, yeah, he's the like gruff marine who's gonna like make a joke about someone getting fragged next to him or something like that, but like at the same time, like I don't know, like he was a drug addict and like yeah mean and had his own sort of like yeah things that he was after.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean like the tone absolutely like changed because of that, because it wasn't like a like high five sort of laughter, it was like a get out of my way because like I'm better than you you sort of laughter.
Yeah, that makes me think of the movie Aliens, and this I think is maybe just a tribute to skilled storytelling. But that movie does have a comic relief character.
Hmm.
The Bill Paxton's Marine, who's
Yeah.
always comically, flipping out. But that movie has none of the Marvel detached irony. This
Hmm.
isn't this all kind of stupid vibe that you get. That movie feels very serious when you watch it, but you also laugh pretty hard
Yeah.
when the Marine says a funny one liner, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the solution is not to take that comic relief character out of your game, but I don't know, watch Alien a couple dozen times and tell me what you can learn about how to place that in a more serious narrative in a way that kind of enhances the seriousness of that narrative
Hmm.
rather than deflating it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, there's your homework. Go watch
Yeah.
Aliens.
All right. Watch Aliens a couple times,
Yeah, a couple
maybe,
times.
maybe 12 times,
Yeah,
and
maybe. Yeah.
email us. Tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, and then watch it again.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
cool. All right. Well, this was a really good conversation. Thanks for
It
having
was.
it. Yeah, and I will peek behind the curtains. I think we actually said some we didn't repeat the exact same things the first
That's
time,
right.
through. So I'm really proud of us, and also like, geez, there's just a lot to think about when it comes to tone in particular. Yeah, and I guess I would like think my final like party thought here is like it's also okay if you don't really want to think about this like this is this almost feels like almost like an advanced level topic for
Yep.
running games. Yeah, and I think it's like yeah. So I mean, if you're happy with the tone, like don't feel like you need to need to change it either.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Um, I think that slapstick adventure tone is a thing that makes Dungeons and Dragons and games like it just a special experience. And
Hmm.
after when you've been doing it for years and years, you're going to want to tweak it and change that tone. But
Hmm.
but if that's a tone that you enjoy, like enjoy the heck out of it.
Yeah,
That's it's part of the game. So
yeah. All
all
right,
right,
cool. All right, so I think we're done dispensing advice for the week.
that's right.
Yeah,
But
so
mostly just watch Aliens a bunch of times.
yeah, that's never a bad conclusion to draw
Yeah,
draw from this podcast. Yeah, so we've been Roll for Topic. We're part of the Roll for It Media podcasting network. Our sister show, The Splat Book with John Corey and Kyle Latino, is wonderful. I have not had a chance to listen to their latest episode. I believe it is about the never-ending story and the idea of melancholy in your games. So if you want probably a more nuanced take about how to inject some melancholy into your game, probably go listen to that that
not
one.
the never-ending story. It should be how to inject having your childhood ruined by watching it. But
Yes.
but anyway, listen. Maybe they cover the traumatic childhood scarring that happens when you
Yeah,
watch that movie. But
they probably do. Yeah,
yeah,
we've
they
been.
do.
Yeah, I mean, we've been chatting on the Discord about the movie Labyrinth as well. I feel like Labyrinth and Neverending Story sort of slot into the same part of my brain of like movies that are probably not for children, but also like a lot of children watched when back in the 80s and 90s
Right, right.
and stuff. Yeah, I think I'm just totally going on tangents now, but the first time that I saw the Neverending Story was actually in Spanish at a friend's house, which is maybe the ideal way to watch it. I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker; I never have been. Yeah, so just letting sort of the images wash over you is there's a lot a lot happening in that movie.
This reminds me, Chris, of I was on an archaeological dig in Jordan, and we decided that we really wanted to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Mm-hmm.
but the only version of it we could find was in English, on like a fourth hand videotape.
Yes.
So
Oh yes.
almost impossible to tell what's going on the screen. And it had both Greek and Arabic subtitles in it, and like plastered on top of each other.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was a transcendent way to experience a piece of film. I'll put it that way.
Oh, that is great. Oh, that is really wonderful. Yeah, I guess watch Aliens on a
There you go.
VHS.
There
Yeah.
you go. In a different language on an
Yeah.
old VHS copy. All right,
Yeah.
we got to sign off here though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.